Molly collapsed. Really? Is she okay?
I don't know. The teacher at school said she just passed out during swim class. My daughter Molly caused hyperventilation during swimming class at school and was taken to the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, Molly was sleeping peacefully. Seeing her sleeping face, I heaved a sigh of relief.
Sarah, how's Molly? Is she okay?
My husband John also rushed over after hearing the news. She's just sleeping calmly now. You can relax, the doctor responded, though his expression was somber for some reason. Doctor, please tell me everything. As I pressed the doctor, almost scolding him, he seemed to make up his mind and ask,
How is your daughter's relationship with her grandparents?
Why do you ask such a question? I am inquiring about how well your daughter gets along with her grandparents, the doctor asked me again. I was at a loss to answer the unexpected question.
Hey, doctor, stop insulting my father and mother any further,
John said, shaking with anger. John had veins bulging on his forehead, and I could feel his rage. What's wrong with you? I was surprised by my husband's emotional display, as he usually doesn't show his feelings.
Then I will tell you.
And then, as a mother, I was struck by the devastating truth that came from the doctor's mouth. My name is Sarah Wilson, a 42-year-old office worker. I currently live with my office worker husband, our elementary school-aged daughter, and my in-laws, making it 5 of us in total. We originally lived separately from my in-laws. However, my job paid well, but during busy seasons, I would come home late at night. John, being in a management position, often prioritized work as well. John's parents were very focused on education, so even after joining the company, John was work-oriented, always aiming for greater heights. He was such a workaholic that he would continue working at home after he got home. As a result, both John and I often made our daughter Molly feel lonely. We have a good income, but I feel sorry for Molly because this makes her feel lonely, I said with a sigh during a discussion with him. Then John made a suggestion.
If you're okay with it, Sarah, why don't we live with my parents? Actually, they have been suggesting this for a while.
John's father, Michael, was an elite employee who worked for a major trading company for many years. John's mother, Elizabeth, was an educator who taught at a prestigious middle school until she gave birth to John. However, Michael had to take early retirement a few years ago due to worsening chronic illness. My mill supported the family as a stay-at-home mother after she quit her teaching job, but she started working part-time when my Phil retired. My husband and I had been sending a fixed amount of money to his parents every month.
I've also been thinking about renovating the family home to make it duplex style. I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think living in a house with a yard would be better for Molly than our current apartment.
Molly's school would be better surrounded by nature than the urban area.
We would discuss this every night after Molly had gone to bed, and then report our decision to my mill over the phone. We've come to this conclusion. What do you think, Elizabeth?
We would welcome that. In fact, we were hoping to suggest living together.
Hearing this from you made me happy and relieved. Thus, our plans for living together smoothly progressed. We renovated the in-laws' house, allocating the first floor for them and the second floor for our family's living space. We didn't install locked doors between the spaces so we could always access each other's areas when needed, but we basically respected each other's privacy. I also thought that since my husband and I often came home late from work, Molly wouldn't feel lonely anymore, as she could have dinner with her grandparents on the first floor. But every morning when I leave for work, I can't help but feel guilty towards my in-laws. Thank you so much for taking care of Molly all the time. While John and I are at work, the in-laws always help Molly with her homework.
No problem.
That's right, Sarah. Molly is our dear granddaughter. Don't worry about it.
Michael said with a hearty laugh. Molly, make sure you listen to Grandma and be a good girl.
Yes, I see.
Then I'm off. Thank you in advance. Having the in-laws as allies made me feel more capable of facing work than ever before. 3 months have passed since we started living together. That day, I finished work early and got home sooner than usual, and Molly ran up to me crying and hugged me tightly. "What's wrong, Molly? Why are you crying?" Molly clung to me and wouldn't look up. Elizabeth followed her and said, "It seems Molly is just so happy to see her mom," as she tried to stroke Molly's head. Molly shook her head vehemently, showing her displeasure. Elizabeth smiled sadly. "Molly, that's not okay. Grandma always helps you with your homework. It's sad for Grandma if you act like this."
She's probably just at an age where she wants to be spoiled by her parents, right, Molly?
"I am sorry for making you feel bad."
It's all right, I don't mind.
Elizabeth said, still smiling gently.
Molly was doing her best with her studies until just now. She's a smart girl.
When Elizabeth tried to pat Molly on the head, Molly fiercely shook her head, showing her refusal. "Molly, Mommy will get angry. Say sorry to Grandma." When I scolded her, Molly reluctantly turned to Elizabeth and said in a trembling voice, "Sorry, Grandma." Molly usually seemed very attached to her grandparents, so at that moment, I didn't think much of it, assuming she just didn't want to study because she wanted to play.
It's me who should say sorry, Molly.
I thought I saw tears in Elizabeth's eyes, but realizing I was watching, she quickly covered it by laughing and saying, "Something got in my eye." As time went by, I realized that not only Elizabeth's behavior but also Molly's was unusual. Molly often played alone even before living with her grandparents, but she had never clung to me and cried like that before. And yet, she showed such an attitude towards her kind grandmother, who always doted on her. Maybe Molly was experiencing troubles that we adults couldn't understand. As bedtime approached, I discussed it with John. If I cut back on work, I could spend more time with Molly. She might not feel so lonely.
What are you saying now? We've discussed this many times and decided. My parents are taking care of Molly, so there's no need to worry.
I know that, but even if your parents are good people, they can't replace Molly's mother.
Are you saying my parents aren't good enough?
John frowned and glared at me. John often gave me that look when he didn't like something. I'm not saying that. It's just.
Anyway, we should just leave Molly's care to my parents.
He insisted, turning his back to me as if to end the conversation, and fell asleep. Winter came, and my busy work schedule finally entered a slow period. I'll do the dishes, you rest.
Oh, really? Aren't you tired from work?
It's relatively slow at work now, so I can do laundry and cleaning on my days off.
Is that so? Well, I'll take your word for it and watch TV.
I decided to dedicate myself to the household chores, making up for the time I couldn't contribute before. John remained busy with his work as usual.
Sarah is really putting in the effort. Well then, leave Molly's shower to me.
Are you sure? You must be tired. I responded, thinking he was being considerate due to my bustling around the house.
Leave it to me. Parent-child communication is important. After all,
He said, puffing out his chest. Molly, go ahead and take a shower with Daddy. I called out to her, and she took John's hand and headed to the bathroom. Imagining the delightful scene of father and daughter together, I couldn't help but smile. However, when Molly came out of the shower, I was startled. Molly, your face is really red, isn't it? Her face seemed unusually flushed. Molly just looked up at John and kept her mouth shut, not saying anything. What's wrong, Molly? Why are you so quiet?
maybe she stayed under the shower too long and got overheated. She must be feeling a bit woozy.
John responded for her. Are you really okay? I asked her repeatedly, concerned, but each time Molly would glance at John and nod, saying, "Yeah, I'm fine." From that day on, despite being busy with work, John took it upon himself to give Molly her daily shower. However, Molly's face appeared red after each bath. Could Molly be sick? Maybe we should have her seen a doctor.
You're overreacting, Molly. You're okay, right? Nothing hurts.
Yeah, I'm fine.
See, Sarah, you worry too much about Molly.
John said, dismissing my concerns with a laugh. At that time, I was still unaware of my daughter's suffering. Time passed, and the following summer arrived. Swimming classes started at Molly's elementary school. Molly had always loved playing in the water since she was young, and she looked forward to the swimming classes every year. That's great, Molly. Your favorite swimming classes start today.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you sure you remember how to swim after a year?
Yeah, probably.
For some reason, Molly looked downcast that morning. Even though she had been eagerly anticipating the summer, she didn't smile once that morning. I thought she might be a bit nervous about going back to the pool after a long time, but looking at her face, it seemed more like fear than nervousness. Molly, are you okay?
I'm okay, Mom. Don't worry about me.
Molly said, forcing a strained smile. Are you sure you're not pushing yourself? If you're feeling unwell, I can call the school and you can stay home.
I'm fine, so you go to work, Mom.
Okay, Molly. I'm going to work now.
Bye. See you later, Mom.
Molly smiled and saw me off. But her smile still seemed forced. Molly will be okay. Grandma and Grandpa are there if anything happens. I reassured myself and focused on my work. Returning to the office after lunch break, I received alarming news.
Sarah, it's urgent. Your daughter's school called, saying she fainted during swim class and has been taken to the hospital.
My colleagues said in a panic. What, Molly?
You should go now.
I was so upset that I couldn't move for a moment, but my boss urged me to come back to myself, so I picked up a taxi and hurried to the hospital. On the way, I contacted my husband.
Molly collapsed. Is it true? Is she okay?
I don't know. The teacher said she just fainted all of a sudden during the swimming lesson.
What is the school doing? If something had happened, they would have had to take responsibility later.
Now's not the time for that. I'm on my way to the hospital where Molly was taken.
Okay, I'm heading there now too.
My usually work-focused husband seemed genuinely flustered this time. When I arrived at the hospital, Molly was peacefully sleeping in her bed. Seeing her sleeping face, I felt a wave of relief. I'm so glad Molly is safe. The tension I had been carrying broke, and I felt dizzy.
Are you all right?
Supported by the doctor nearby, I managed not to collapse.
Sarah, is Molly okay?
John, Molly is. I tried to answer, but my words tangled. She's just sleeping calmly now. Please don't worry, the doctor calmly responded. Doctor, thank you so much. I lowered my head to the doctor, tears of relief falling. However, the doctor's expression remained serious and somber. Doctor, is there something wrong?
Well, actually.
The doctor seemed hesitant to respond. Doctor, please tell me everything. I was seized with fear that perhaps a serious illness had been found in Molly.
Well, how is your daughter's relationship with her grandparents on a daily basis?
The doctor asked carefully. What do you mean by that? I couldn't immediately grasp the intention behind the doctor's roundabout questioning.
I'm asking if your daughter's relationship with her grandparents is going well.
Yes, it is. But why are you asking this? I understood the question, but was puzzled as to why the doctor would want to know this. An inexplicable fear was growing in me about what could happen between Molly and her grandparents. As I struggled to respond and fell silent, John behind me said, shaking with anger, "Hey, doctor, what are you trying to say?" I could see the anger rising in him, veins standing out on his forehead. What's wrong with you? Feeling something was seriously off with John, who rarely showed his emotions, I became even more concerned.
Stop insulting my parents.
I'm not trying to insult them. I just want to confirm the facts. I tried to clarify.
John, becoming furious, seemed ready to confront the doctor physically, but the doctor remained calm and tried to soothe him.
My parents care about Molly. Stop making baseless accusations. If you insult my parents further, I will sue you.
Calm down a bit.
How can I stay calm? My parents are being insulted.
Why do you ask such a question? The doctor sighed deeply, as if troubled.
Well, I'll tell you.
The doctor then recounted the circumstances when Molly was brought to the hospital. When Molly was about to enter the pool for swimming class, she hyperventilated and was brought in by ambulance, which I already knew from the school's explanation. However, the concern arose afterward. When Molly arrived at the hospital, she seemed to be desperately trying to plead something even in her troubled breathing. As the doctor was attending to her, he leaned in to listen to her murmurs and heard her repeatedly apologizing, saying, "Sorry, Grandma. Sorry, Grandpa," as if she was in a daze.
The fact that she repeatedly apologized to her grandparents in such a distressing situation suggests that there must have been a significant experience. What exactly happened between your daughter and her grandparents?
This question took me by surprise, as it was completely unexpected. "Doctor, I don't understand what you're talking about," I said, but my gaze shifted from the doctor to my husband, who seemed even more agitated.
What's with that, love?
You know something, don't you?" I confronted him, sensing his strange behavior indicated he was hiding something.
I don't know anything. This doctor's talking nonsense. It's impossible that my parents would do something terrible to Molly.
John, who had been angry, suddenly started laughing, as if trying to cover up something that shouldn't be revealed.
What I've mentioned is not nonsense. I'm merely stating the facts. Furthermore, I have not said that your parents have done something terrible to your daughter. I understand now. In that case, I will be clear. I suspect that her grandparents may have been causing her distress on a regular basis. Therefore, we have already contacted Child Protective Services.
You can't just do whatever you want.
In cases of suspicion, it is my duty as a doctor to promptly contact the relevant authorities.
The doctor argued back. Perhaps our loud conversation woke Molly, as she opened her eyes.
Mom,
"Molly, you're awake. Thank goodness." I rushed to her and hugged her tightly as she sat up. "You can take her home today," the doctor said, to which John responded, "Of course. How can we leave her with such a reckless doctor? Let's go, Molly." He then grabbed our daughter's hand, trying to make her walk forcefully. "Don't touch her." Instinctively, I pulled Molly's hand away from John before even thinking. Tension filled the air between John and me, but my concern was more for Molly's well-being. In the taxi ride home, John continued to rant. "That doctor is all lies. He just wants to make my parents look bad." I couldn't take John's words seriously and remained silent.
What? You doubt my parents too?
"It's not that, but..."
Molly, have you been abused by Grandma and Grandpa?
yeah, no, I haven't.
See, Molly says she hasn't been mistreated. That doctor was just spouting nonsense.
Molly's response seemed forced, clearly under the pressure of John's dominating demeanor. Seeing Molly's frightened expression, I speculated about what could have happened between her and her grandparents. Something horrendously frightening must have occurred to Molly, something she felt she couldn't even tell me about. The fact that the doctor felt the need to contact Child Protective Services indicated a serious concern. But when I questioned my in-laws about it, I knew that if they said they didn't know, that would be the end of it. There is no evidence that they were harassing my daughter.
Hey, are you even listening?
John's voice snapped me back to reality. "Sorry, did you say something?"
I've told you before. Don't let anyone from Child Protective Services inside if they come asking around.
Why? If we have nothing to hide, we should let them in and prove that everything is fine. I countered him, even though I knew it was useless.
What if it starts rumors around the neighborhood? It could affect my career. Think before you speak.
John had always walked the path of an elite, never facing failure from childhood through his professional life. His high pride feared bad reputation more than anything, making me wonder if his pride was more important than our daughter Molly's well-being. Should he protect his pride more than his daughter? As I thought about this, my eyes fell on the taxi's dash cam. That's right, that could be useful. I remembered a crucial fact I hadn't shared with John or the in-laws. The next day, I pretended everything was normal, submitted a leave request at work, and after killing time at a friend's house, I waited for Molly at her school's gate when it was time for her to get out. "Molly, come here." Seeing me, Molly looked surprised but also visibly relieved.
Mom, what's happening?
"I'll explain later. We're going to take a plane." We then took a bus to the airport and flew to my hometown where my parents lived. From that night into the early morning, John called repeatedly. Feeling frustrated by the repeated calls, I decided to accept the call.
What have you done? Where did you take Molly?
"She's in a safe place, out of your reach."
What? Don't be ridiculous. Just come back and explain everything to me properly?
"We're not coming back. An explanation over the phone will suffice."
Then at least send Molly back to us.
John yelled over the phone. I steadfastly declined. "I refuse."
Why? What have we ever done to you?
"If you don't remember, let me enlighten you. It's because you and your parents have been making Molly do things she despises every day." The anger I had suppressed in me exploded. I explained the process of getting here to John step by step. On the way back from the hospital, I remembered, while looking at the taxi's dash cam, that I had installed a camera in the living room of the first floor. Unusual occurred. It was set up to monitor the elderly in-laws and Molly, alerting my smartphone immediately if anything unusual occurred. The first floor, where the in-laws lived, allowed Molly free access when John and I were not around. Shortly after we started living as a joint family, Elizabeth began forcing Molly to wash dishes and do cleaning tasks. Initially, I thought it was just Elizabeth's way of teaching her granddaughter household chores, but Elizabeth never instructed her. She just watched Molly with Michael. Molly complied without complaints, completing the tasks as told. However, when Molly was about to go back upstairs after finishing, Elizabeth called her back, saying in a sorrowful voice, "Next, please clean the bathroom. Thank you."
But I have homework.
I'm sorry, but please do as you're told. If you can't, we can't let you live here. Please do as you're told, for your own good.
With that, Elizabeth grabbed Molly's wrist, seemingly trying to force her outside against her will.
Do as you're told, Molly.
Elizabeth's voice was clear on the surveillance camera, which captured sound well despite slight static. Elizabeth sounded sorrowful even as she commanded.
Grandpa, help me.
Molly pleaded for help from her grandfather, Michael, who did nothing to reprimand Elizabeth, and merely watched silently. Faced with this unbelievable reality unfolding in the video, I was speechless. The harassment from the grandparents towards Molly appeared to continue daily when I was not at home. I couldn't believe that the grandparents were doing such things behind my back. I kept the surveillance camera a secret, but shared with John the harassment Molly faced from his parents. Misinterpreting something, John angrily retorted, "Molly, after all the discipline, she still talked. Wasn't it enough? So you started everything, didn't you?"
What are you talking about?
I mentioned your parents' actions, but I never said you were involved.
You tricked me. That's despicable.
Despicable? Who's the one who's been doing terrible things to our elementary school daughter? I remembered the days when John insisted on giving Molly showers. I know what you were doing during Molly's shower. I didn't have solid proof, but decided to confront him.
It's education. She didn't want to study anymore, and she seemed satisfied with her A score on the test. So I just thought I'd give her a little re-education.
Re-education? How can you even say that? Molly is terrified.
I only told Molly she couldn't get out of the shower until she correctly answered my questions.
John confessed his mistake. You were mad when the doctor at the hospital asked about Molly's relationship with her grandparents, weren't you? But that wasn't to protect your parents. You were afraid of being caught forcing your unwilling parents to do it. That's also why you refused to let Child Protective Services intervene. The surveillance footage clearly recorded John threatening his parents. The in-laws weren't willingly making Molly do things she disliked. Molly's face was always reddened because John wouldn't let her out of the shower for a long time. The shower experience became traumatic for Molly, turning water into her fear. Then, on the day there was swimming class at school, Molly was traumatized again the moment she tried to enter the pool, triggering a panic attack. It's your fault she can no longer enjoy the pool she loves.
So what? You don't understand my feelings.
I don't want to know about it.
My father was a top executive, and my mother was a renowned educator locally. But I was always scorned if my grades dropped even slightly as a child. I don't want to feel that miserable ever again. That's why I was strict with Molly, to spare her from going through what I did. That's what I believe parental discipline was.
With those words, John began to laugh with a sinister tone.
I felt victorious inside when my father had to retire due to his chronic illness and came to me for financial help. I turned the tables on them. I told my parents I'd support them financially, but in return, they had to discipline Molly strictly. That was the condition under which I agreed to live with them.
I was horrified to find out John's twisted true feelings. I recorded this phone call. And that's not all. The surveillance camera has also recorded how you threatened your parents, both their actions and voices. I will use this evidence to protect her. You are finished.
Hey, wait a minute. We can talk this through.
John was panicking at the end, but I had nothing more to say and hung up the phone, then blocked his number. I went to the police and child services with footage from the surveillance camera, the recording of the call, and the medical report I got from the hospital.
This is terrible. The video and the audio are clear evidence.
The responding police officer promised to deal with the incident immediately. Later, I was shocked by the new facts that I learned from Molly. When I asked her why she didn't confide in me sooner, Molly, in tears, said,
Because Dad threatened that if I didn't do it right, he would put busy Mom through the same ordeal. I don't want Mom to get hurt.
John, her biological father, had been threatening her all this time. And to protect me, she had been keeping her fear and anxiety to herself, even though she was just a child. She was trying to protect me, her mother, even though she should have been the hardest. I hadn't noticed the pain my daughter was going through. Am I even a mother? Ashamed of myself, I hugged my sobbing daughter tightly. I'm sorry, Molly. It was all my fault.
It's not your fault, Mom, because you saved me.
Feeling her warmth, I couldn't stop my tears. Of course, I'm on your side, Molly. No matter what happens, I won't leave you alone. I love you so much, and I will always protect you. I vowed in my heart never to let her experience sadness again. Ultimately, the medical report and the recorded phone calls were decisive, and John was arrested for criminal injury. However, the in-laws were granted extenuating circumstances. Some time passed after that incident. The gaunt faces of my in-laws, Michael and Elizabeth, showed up at my parents' house.
I'm so sorry, Sarah and Molly. It's too late for us to apologize now, but
We are truly sorry. We knew it was wrong, but we just couldn't refuse his demands. We are such terrible grandparents.
Please lift your heads, Michael, Elizabeth. From the videos, it's clear you were coerced by John into mistreating Molly. To be honest, I felt like blaming my in-laws. But blaming them wouldn't change anything. Michael apologized deeply, perhaps because he understood my feelings. He had a chronic illness that should have hurt his legs, but he stood upright with his face contorted.
Even though we were threatened, the fact that we did something terrible to our dear granddaughter is true. We don't expect forgiveness, but we just wanted to apologize to Sarah and Molly. Maybe, in the end, we just wanted to ease our own feelings.
Molly ran over and gently patted the backs of Michael and Elizabeth.
Grandpa and Grandma, I'm not mad at you. Thank you for teaching my homework.
Molly's words broke them down, and they didn't look up. It seems to say that they have no right to show their faces to their granddaughter. Molly told them they could come to see her any time, but after that, my in-laws never appeared before us again. 5 years have passed since then, and Molly has become a middle school student. Currently, Molly and I now live with my parents. I explained the situation to my company, and they allowed me to switch to primarily remote work. Although the local police are ready to respond if John shows up, I still can't shake off my anxiety. I've attended security seminars and bought security gadgets to strengthen the security at home. I make sure to drop off and pick up Molly from school to protect her. Molly has slowly started to regain her smile. Recently, she began helping my father with the gardening he started as a hobby after retirement.
Grandpa, look at this big potato we harvested.
Wow, that's a big one.
Molly, how about we make some potato salad with your mom tonight?
Okay, we'll do that.
Living with Molly, my parents seem to have rejuvenated both in spirit and appearance. Just as Molly tried to protect me, I want to protect her with all my might from now on. Watching Molly's carefree smile, I felt this more than ever.
Growing up in a child care facility after my parents died in an accident, I didn't see any meaning in living or working hard. One day, I received a letter from my mom, who was supposed to be dead. Moreover, it was addressed to the house where I lived with my parents. This couldn't be happening. But maybe. After days of thinking about it, I decided to go to the address on the letter. However, standing in front of the house full of memories, I suddenly got cold feet. So, I decided to peek from the backyard. There, I saw a middle-aged couple living. I observed more closely. I was thinking if they were strangers, I would sneak back. But the next moment, I doubted my eyes. My dad, Mom. I stood there in an unexpected turn of events. My name is Ashley Thompson. I entered a child care facility at the age of 10 and graduated from it 2 years ago. Now, I juggle multiple part-time jobs while living alone in a cheap apartment in New York. My parents died in a traffic accident when I was 10. It was a pile-up on the freeway during the summer holidays. I was in the car too, but miraculously survived because I was sitting in the back seat. However, my parents, who were in the driver's and passenger's seats, died on impact when they crashed into a truck in front of them. It was my birthday celebration on the way back from visiting the leisure pool that I had always wanted to visit. I was dozing off when suddenly a cannon-like shock hit me, and the next moment, I couldn't move. With no sense of time, I desperately called for my parents. But there was no answer from them, and I lost consciousness, waking up later in a hospital bed. As the nurse realized I was awake, she hurried around, and soon, police officers and doctors started coming into my room. All the while, I kept wondering when my parents would come. I asked the nurse several times, "Where are Dad and Mom?" but got only vague answers. At the age of 10, I thought they must be hospitalized in another hospital. A few days later, I learned the meaning of those vague answers. A woman, claiming to be my aunt, told me my parents' injuries were fatal, and there was no hope for survival. She also mentioned she had her own family and couldn't take me in. I couldn't understand the situation at all. She explained the situation simply enough for me to understand. As a result, I learned that once I was discharged, I would be going to a child care facility. I had many questions about what would happen to our house, my school, etc., but the thought of becoming part of a stranger's family was so unwelcome that I felt slightly relieved. My injuries healed, and I was sent to the child care facility without returning home. As my aunt had taken care of the funeral and sorting through our belongings, sending my things to the facility, we had been in touch through letters with her, so I was informed about these arrangements in advance. To be honest, the thought of strangers rummaging through our house felt awful, but there was nothing 10-year-old me could do about it. The idea that I would never return home had never crossed my mind. I wanted to know why, but I didn't know whom to ask or how to express it. Everything progressed without my consent, and I just went along with it, day by day. Even after entering the child care facility, I would receive letters from my mom's sister a few times a year, but the content was always the same.
Are you doing okay? Do you need any help?
At first, I replied to her, but soon I ran out of things to say. So, gradually, I stopped responding to the letters. Since I had never met my mom's sister while my parents were alive, she was like a stranger to me. Being worried about by a stranger felt meaningless, and exchanging letters felt like a chore. Perhaps she sensed my feelings because the letters from my mother's sister became fewer each year. By the time I graduated from the child care facility, I had almost forgotten the letters existed, becoming distant. I always felt left behind in an unknown world, spending my days in the child care facility. Maybe because I never returned home after the funeral during my hospital stay, reality never fully set in. Why am I here? A sense of alienation always followed me. As I grew older, this alienation turned into loneliness within me. I have nothing left. There's no point in trying if there's nothing. That's how I came to despise everything and lost my motivation. So, after graduating high school and leaving the facility to get a job, I couldn't fit in with the gap between me and others or the workplace atmosphere, and I quit the job soon after. I became a part-time worker, but I never felt at home in any job, and they never lasted long. I've been unemployed for a long time, and my savings run out pretty quickly. I was barely scraping by with day jobs, living on the edge every day. Is there really a point in living through such loneliness? Wouldn't it be easier to just leave my apartment and live on the streets? I thought about it many times, but always stopped myself at the last moment. My parents would surely be sad if they knew I was living on the streets. Even though I knew I could never see them again, I didn't want to do anything that would make them sad. On a particularly exhausting day, I received a call from the child care facility saying there was a letter for me. Perhaps because of the guilt from quitting my job shortly after starting, I tried to avoid any contact with the child care facility. So, I intended to have them throw away the letter without receiving it. However, as soon as I heard the sender of the letter, I was shocked as if I had been hit on the head with a hammer. The sender of the letter was my mom, who was supposed to have died in an accident when I was 10 years old. I immediately went to the child care facility to get the letter. From the moment I received the call, my mind was in chaos. My parents were supposed to have died in an accident when I was 10. That was an unchangeable fact. So, miracles don't happen, and the letter must surely be some mistake. I tried hard not to escape from reality, calming myself down. Yet, against my feelings, the impossible hope that the accident death was a mistake kept emerging in my mind. If my mom was alive, why did she leave me in the facility for so many years? What would sending a letter now change? As I was shaken by the train to the child care facility, I continued to ponder many things. However, I couldn't find a satisfying answer or sort out my feelings until the end. Instead, my mind became a mess of confusion, joy, doubt, anger, and sadness, and I felt like I could cry at any moment. When I arrived at the child care facility after more than an hour, my head was blank from overthinking. Let's just see the thing first and then think, I muttered to myself before entering the facility. Receiving the letter in the office, I stared intensely at the handwriting on the envelope. It was unmistakably my deceased mom's handwriting, and the sender was indeed my mom. Hesitantly opening the envelope, inside were 3 letters with illustrations of a character I liked when I was 10. At the beginning of the first letter, it read, "To Ashley, now 20 years old." Just looking at the letters, filled with my mom's soft and slightly quirky handwriting, made my chest tight and tears come to my eyes. The letter, filled with memories from my birth until I turned 10, and imaginations of how I would grow and spend the next 10 years, was just like my mother herself. I looked up at the ceiling several times to avoid wetting the letter with my tears. Still, I couldn't stop the tears from flowing, leaving stains in several places. After finishing the letter, I thanked the staff at the facility and quickly left the place because my mind was still confused and I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. Riding back on the train, I read the letter over and over, feeling as if I could grasp something by doing so. As a result, I concluded that the letter must have been written before the accident. My mom wrote this for my 10th birthday. The age of 10 was probably a big break for my mom. Probably, my mom wrote this letter as a commemoration of me turning 10 and filled it with hopes and thoughts for my future 10 years later. The question was, who sent it? The first person that came to mind was my mom's sister. However, it had been years since we became estranged, and I couldn't understand the reason for her to send a letter in my mom's name. Besides, the written address was the house where I lived when I was 10. If it were indeed my mom's sister, she would have used her name and her own address. Since we are so estranged from each other that I have forgotten, she won't remember me. I couldn't think of anyone else who might be behind this. The image of my mom in the letter filled me with happiness and confusion. What was the right way to feel? What should I do after reading this? No matter how much I thought, I couldn't find an answer. Tired of thinking, I decided to put the letter away in a drawer as if nothing happened and return to my usual daily life. However, as days passed, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. I thought about throwing it away, but every time I saw my mom's handwriting on the envelope, I knew I couldn't do it. So, I decided to go meet the sender of the letter. Having nothing in the first place, I had nothing more to lose. Plus, maybe I could ask the sender for help with my life. I might have consciously been expecting something from the sender to change my current life. As I took the train towards the familiar address, I gazed out at the streets, completely different from my memories. Places that were once just vacant lands and forests were now filled with a big shopping center and many houses. The station I got off at had a completed bus terminal and even a stylish cafe. This too is a world unknown to me, I thought as I trudged towards the address in the letter. However, a few minutes later, as I turned a corner, the scene that unfolded before me took my breath away. It was a residential area almost unchanged from my memories, from 10 years ago. That scenery instantly pulled me back from a colorless, blurry world into the vivid world of 10 years ago. This was undoubtedly the town where I lived. And ahead, there was our family's house. Before I knew it, I found myself running towards the house. I was filled with a strange sense of reassurance, like a school child returning home or a child who had been lost for a long time. At the end of my frantic run, there was my beloved home, just as it was in my memories. The letter had indeed been sent from my home. But when I come to the front of the house, I didn't have the courage to press the doorbell. The fear of the unknown outweighed my desire to uncover the truth, keeping my feet planted. After pondering what to do, I decided to observe a little more and went around to the backyard. I looked softly into the garden, somewhat uncomfortable with the thieving behavior. Peeking into the garden, I saw a middle-aged couple preparing for sunbathing on the balcony. The man seemed to be in a wheelchair. To check if they were acquaintances, I continued to observe. As I heard their calm voices, their faces turned briefly in my direction. The moment I saw their faces, I inadvertently exclaimed, "Ah, Dad, Mom, this can't be real." I stood frozen in shock, and then the man in the wheelchair noticed me.
Are you Ashley? Is that Ashley?
He muttered my name, then suddenly started crying out loud. Meanwhile, I was so overwhelmed by the shocking turn of events that I couldn't move. The next moment, a woman who had been inside the house sensed something was wrong and rushed out to the balcony. She ran straight to the wheelchair and spoke to the man. Through his sobs, he pointed at me and said something to her. The woman looked at me intently, then suddenly smiled and said, "You're Ashley, aren't you? We have something we'd like to talk to you about. Could you please come in?" She invited me into the house. Although I was still trying to grasp the situation, I had many questions of my own. I nodded silently and was led through the front door into the living room. The woman introduced herself as Patricia, and the man in the wheelchair was indeed my dad, Stephen. They were married and now lived in the house as a couple. Patricia told me that my father was in a coma and critical condition after the accident, wandering between life and death. I was supposed to have been informed about this when I was 10, but I had no memory of it. When I told Patricia this, she asked, "How were you told?" And I shared that my aunt, my mom's sister, had said his condition was hopeless. However, upon reflection, I remembered being told only about my mom's death. If that was the case, why was my father considered dead? Patricia and I spent hours reconciling my memories with the truth. As a result, I realized I had made a huge mistake. As a 10-year-old who couldn't grasp that my father was in a coma, I felt a unilateral rejection towards him for never coming to see me. Dad never comes to see me. Maybe he's mad. I'm sure she's dead because I said I wanted to go to the leisure pool, I thought, feeling rejected by my father. This eventually morphed into the memory of both my parents dying in the accident.
This is just my guess, but maybe it was less painful for Ashley back then to think both had died than to feel rejected by your dad.
Patricia suggested, trying to console me, but I was filled with remorse towards my dad. Yet, I was also puzzled. I was terrified to ask, but I knew I'd regret it if I didn't. I gathered my courage and asked Patricia, "Why didn't my dad come for me?" Patricia glanced at my dad. My dad nodded silently, and Patricia told me what was going on.
Stephen regained consciousness more than half a year after the accident.
Half a year? That coincided with the time I was discharged from the hospital?
Even though it was miraculous that he woke up, it took him several more months to comprehend his situation. Waking up feeling like it was just one night's sleep, only to find out half a year had passed. It's understandable.
Moreover, my dad was left with many disabilities, including issues with memory, speech, and physical functions. Doctors had said returning to his previous life was impossible. Given the bleak outlook, my aunt proceeded with the plan to place me in a child care facility.
By the time I woke up, everything was gone. I was painfully aware of the time I had lost and its importance.
My dad said, tears brimming in his eyes. Patricia told me that after being discharged, my dad was admitted to the disability facility where she worked.
Even though he wanted to see you, There was a time he couldn't express it because he struggled with words. At the same time, he began to accept that Lisa had passed away. Stephen fell into a deep depression and was even admitted to a psychiatric ward.
My dad, too, had been searching for a reason to live in his despair, just like me. Hearing this, I felt incredibly relieved. My dad hadn't rejected or forgotten about me. Instead, he had been thinking of me so much that it made him sick. Feeling this, the cold loneliness that had taken up residence in my heart began to melt away, replaced by a strange warmth. Even after returning from the psychiatric ward to the facility, my dad's emotional state remained unstable. He refused rehabilitation, didn't eat, and had trouble communicating, leading to problematic behavior like lashing out at staff or throwing objects. The staff's approach to my dad gradually became more bureaucratic. In the facility, where he was treated like an untouchable, Patricia was the one who faced him without a grimace. She used homemade cards and a whiteboard to understand what he wanted to communicate. She also massaged him daily to prevent his muscles from stiffening and made time for conversation practice by visiting him. My dad said, "I saw my Lisa's image in her. Thinking that Lisa would be sad seeing me in such a disheveled state, I felt I had no choice but to try harder," and tightly held Patricia's hand. It was evident how important Patricia had become to my dad. I felt a bit envious of their relationship. I wished I had someone to support me like that. Afterwards, my dad underwent rehabilitation every day like he was reborn, stopping all aggressive behaviors toward the staff. The dad who wouldn't even try to get out of bed at the beginning was now going to the rehab room on his own and voluntarily training. Just hearing about it felt like a miracle. But the real miracle was yet to come. Thanks to his desperate rehab efforts, my dad recovered enough to live a normal life. He was able to leave the disability facility.
The doctors were amazed, saying they've never seen someone recover like me.
My dad said with a hint of pride. Beside him, Patricia also smiled happily. Her smile, so much like my deceased mom's, wrapped my heart in a strange nostalgia and warmth. Speaking of the letter, I hadn't asked about it yet. I took out my mom's letter from my bag and inquired about who sent it. Suddenly, my dad looked down and fell silent. Seeing this, Patricia explained on behalf of my dad. After we got married, while cleaning the room, I accidentally found this letter. Stephen always thought of Ashley but felt he didn't have the right to meet her, avoiding it. I convinced him that we should at least send the letter. With Patricia's explanation, the messy pieces in my head finally came together. It was all a twist of fate. My dad couldn't come to see me due to an accident and disability. I thought my dad was dead. Both of us felt alone, walking through a dimly lit life. Yet, Patricia and the letter left by my mom brought us together.
I never forgot about Ashley, but I felt so guilty for not doing anything for so long, fearing that contacting you now would be a bother. I'm truly sorry.
My dad said that and apologized to me. Hearing about his struggles and turmoil, I felt no blame towards him. Instead, I realized that he had been thinking of me for a long time, and I was honestly happy. The fact that we both reached a point of desperation at the same time made me feel the weird connection of being parent and child, almost making me laugh. Sharing this with Patricia and my dad, both shed tears of laughter. It was the first time I saw such warm tears. Looking out the window, the sunset was casting its light on the balcony. I said, I think it's time for me to go, and stood up. My dad's voice stopped me in a panic.
Wait, now that we've finally met, I don't want to leave Ashley alone again. I might not have the right to say this now, but I want us to be a family again. Stay here, Ashley.
My dad pleaded, tears different from before streaming down his face. I was touched by how much he cared, yet I couldn't shake the fear of disrupting the happiness he had with Patricia. The two feelings of refusing and wanting to live like this with my dad clash, and I'm stuck. I found myself unable to move.
Ashley, if I were your mom, do you think you'd refuse?
What? I was taken aback by the sudden question and stared at Patricia. Patricia smiled softly, as if she could see through my lost heart. Her smile, her generous and gentle consideration, was just like my mom's. It felt as if my real mom was encouraging me. And I had the courage to be honest about my feelings. If you're okay with someone like me, please let me be a part of your family. I answered loudly, and my dad lifted his head so quickly, I thought he might tumble out of his wheelchair in his excitement. Seeing him like that, I laughed out loud for the first time in 10 years. I had finally found my way back to a world where I belonged. Since then, 6 months have passed. I'm currently studying hospitality vigorously to fulfill my dream of becoming a flight attendant. Moreover, I plan to take entrance exams for a specialized school next year. Before coming back here, I had no motivation to do anything, let alone think about my dreams or future. However, reuniting with my dad and having the space to think about my future, my mom's letter once again guided me. At the end of that letter, it read, "What are you doing now? Have you become a flight attendant like you dreamed? No matter the future, Mom is always cheering for Ashley." With my kind mom's thoughts in my heart, I decided to push forward towards my dream. And someday, I secretly plan to repay my dad and Patricia with my first paycheck.
Grandma, this is Anna.
Logan, my grandson, brought a woman named Anna. She was a pale-faced, quiet-looking woman who greeted me with a gentle smile, perhaps out of nervousness. I quickly ushered them into the house. For the meeting, Logan had brought her along, and my daughter-in-law, Rachel, was in a good mood, asking them how they had gotten to know each other.
Mom, please serve them some tea quickly.
Rachel, who had been in a good mood just minutes before, was now visibly upset. The first thing Logan mentioned to his parents was that Anna was pregnant. I was so shocked that I lost my voice. Rachel showed some displeasure at the fact that the two were having a shotgun wedding.
We really want to make this work.
We may be immature, but please allow us to marry.
The two were earnestly seeking marriage approval from his parents. Being the grandmother, I felt it was unnecessary to comment and watched silently, but I was moved by their attitude. However, Rachel made a blatantly displeased face and waved her hand in front of her own face.
Shotgun weddings are so tacky. Just because there's a baby doesn't mean you have to marry. Right, Mom?
Suddenly addressed, I let out an "what?" as Rachel turned a sarcastic smile towards me. Well, indeed, just because there's a baby doesn't necessarily mean you have to marry. Logan's face fell for a moment. I expected that reaction. But you two are trying to move forward because of the baby. After all, it's something Logan and Anna decided together. It's not something anyone else can oppose. Rachel, shouldn't we be supporting Logan and Anna? Rachel drained her coffee mug in one gulp.
Mom, please prepare some more coffee.
She handed me the cup, crossed her arms, and sighed.
Well, opposing it is probably pointless anyway. So when exactly are you planning the wedding?
Oh, we want to do it soon, considering Anna's condition.
I see. So for us, it's like finally taking a break from parenting.
Rachel said this thoughtfully, then turned to face me in the kitchen.
We're going to be living with family from now on, so can our unwanted housekeeper please leave?
Excuse me. Rachel's abrupt words left her husband John stunned, and both Logan and Anna were left with their mouths open in surprise. What should I do now? My name is Catherine. I'm a 70-year-old grandma. I live in a 2-generation household with my only son, John, and his wife, Rachel. Although it may seem happy from the outside, I have been feeling down since my husband passed away a few years ago. Rachel, John's wife, is a strong-minded woman who speaks her mind immediately. Our relationship isn't bad, but I often feel being used by her. When Rachel goes out with friends, she expects me to do the laundry and even asks me to drive her to the station. Rachel seems to think that living in a 2-generation household is her way of showing filial piety. Contrary to my desire for a quiet life after my husband's death, I find myself in a complicated situation.
Come on, get up now.
Rachel's near-screeching voice echoes from the bedroom for Logan and Anna. Oh boy, she seems to be in a bad mood again today. Last night, John worked late, and despite it being a weekend, she woke him up at the usual time to get ready to go out. I tried to speak quietly when I bumped into John in the bathroom. John, are you okay?
I'm fine. I got about 5 hours of sleep.
John smiled gently at me through the mirror while wiping his face with a towel. I've been worried because John has looked pale recently. Despite my concerns, my husband would reassure me he was fine while working, until one day he suddenly collapsed and passed away. That memory was always in my mind, and if possible, I wished to let him rest on his days off. From afar, I could hear loud footsteps. When Rachel appeared in the bathroom, she frowned and made a clearly displeased expression.
How long are you washing your face? Hurry up, I'll be late for my meeting with my friends.
Sorry. I'll change right away.
John, being timid, quickly left the scene to change his clothes. Meanwhile, Rachel turned her gaze to me and handed over a note she was holding.
Mom, this is the shopping list for today.
Okay, got it. Have fun with your friends.
The weather seems nice today. Please open the window down and vacuum.
Rachel left without waiting for my reply. After watching her brazen departure, I let out a heavy sigh. Even when my husband was alive, Rachel had always been a woman who spoke her mind to us. At the beginning of our living together, I had told her, "Don't be shy," but as time went on, her aggressive nature became more apparent. Cooking had always been my task, especially since Rachel was not good at it. If she doesn't like the meal, she would push the plate away, saying, "I told you I can't eat this," or she would grumble about wrinkles in the laundry I had folded. Even so, I had always tried to keep a quiet smile on my face, so as not to make waves, because she was the woman my son John had chosen. But after my husband died, Rachel's attitude became even more extreme, and it was exhausting my spirit.
Catherine, you're home all day today, right? Make sure the bath is ready when I come back.
Rachel left through the front door without looking at me, saying those words. She goes out with friends on a weekly basis. From the beginning of her marriage, she did not do much housework or childcare, was only concerned with her appearance, and often spent a lot of money. She was very sociable and made acquaintances in many places. There were many times I suspected her of infidelity when she was younger, but John always believed she wouldn't do that, so I never pursued it further. After dropping Rachel at the shopping mall and returning, I was surprised to see John carrying a box of chocolates.
Oh, this. Rachel said she's giving them out at her reunion next week.
Really? All of these?
Rachel says she has her pride. She doesn't want to be seen as struggling with money because we live with her parents. Sorry, just let her be.
Of course, it's okay. I understand. Sitting in the chair, I felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. After a while, I took the shopping list Rachel had given me and went out. My familiar shoes felt heavier than usual. Perhaps due to my age, I often felt a dull pain in my knees with every step. Yet, imagining Rachel's likely snide remarks about wasting gas, I gently stroked my knees, urging my heavy feet to persevere. Returning home with shopping bags in both hands, sweat beading on my forehead, I set down the packages in the entrance and stretched my bent back. Then, Logan appeared.
Ah, Grandma, welcome back. I thought you weren't here, so you were shopping.
Logan looked at the bags I brought back, pursing his lips slightly. Since Logan, the only son of John and Rachel, started working last spring, we had seen less of each other. Though we lived together, he was probably busy with work, not returning until late at night and leaving early in the morning. Moreover, he would dress up and go out on weekends. It was rare for Logan to be home during the day on a weekend. Before I could take off my shoes, Logan had taken the shopping bags to the kitchen and began putting things away quickly. Glancing sideways, I sensed a joyful atmosphere in Logan's expression. Did something good happen? Logan smiled as he carefully placed eggs from the pack into the fridge.
Actually, then someone I want to introduce. I'm thinking of bringing her home next week.
As I processed his words, I listened intently, realizing my grandson had reached such an age. Someone you want to introduce, could it be, maybe?
Maybe, Grandma. There's also something I've been thinking about a lot.
Something you've been thinking about?
Yes, I can't talk about it now, but I'll surely tell you someday. For now, would you meet the person I want to introduce?
Excited, Logan made me smile unwittingly. I was curious about what he had been thinking about, but more than that, I was interested in what kind of woman he would bring home. We had lived together since he was little, but Logan had never brought home a girlfriend before. Maybe his absence from home since starting his job was because he was dating, I concluded to myself. For the first time in a while, I forgot the usual unpleasantness and started cleaning while humming lightly. Of course, I had informed Rachel and John about this, but John only muttered about marriage, and Rachel seemed uninterested. On their next day off, Logan brought home the woman he wanted to introduce. Rachel had asked me to clean up in front of the house, and while I was watering, an unfamiliar car pulled up, which made me a bit wary, but then I relaxed seeing my grandson waving with a smile from the driver's seat. The car was a rental. Perhaps he had gone to pick her up in a rental car, which made me internally smile, thinking Logan must be quite smitten.
Grandma, this is Anna.
Seeing the happy face of my grandson introducing the woman beside him, I couldn't help but smile. Anna, Logan brought with him, was a pale-faced, mature-looking woman who smiled quietly and greeted me in a small voice, perhaps nervous. I quickly ushered them into the house. For the introduction, Logan had brought her, and Rachel seemed in a good mood, asking the two how they had become acquainted. At the table set for 4, Rachel and John sat facing Logan and Anna, while I was in the kitchen preparing tea for everyone.
Catherine, please serve them tea quickly.
Rachel's mood had turned sour just minutes after being in a good mood. Because Logan had first told his parents that Anna was pregnant. I was so surprised that I was speechless. The pleasant atmosphere from minutes ago froze in an instant, with Logan showing a seriousness I seldom saw in him. Rachel showed some displeasure at the fact they were having a shotgun wedding.
We really want to make this work.
We may be immature, but please allow us to marry.
The two earnestly sought parental approval for their marriage. As a grandmother, I felt it was unnecessary to say anything and watched silently, but I was moved by their positive attitude. Watching Logan pleaded earnestly in front of his parents, I felt tears forming.
Of course, we support your marriage. It's better to marry soon for the baby's sake and have a peaceful mind.
Thank you, Dad.
Logan said with a smile, looking at Anna. Rachel made a blatantly disgusted face, waving her hand in front of her face.
Shotgun weddings are so tacky. Can you explain how this happened, Anna?
Anna was taken aback by the unexpected question.
Well.
She mumbled, looking down at the table. Logan quickly put his hand on her shoulder.
Times have changed, and this kind of marriage isn't unusual anymore. Besides, we have our farts and are determined to do our best.
Logan, you proposed marriage in a hurry after hearing about the baby, didn't you? Was it a well-considered decision?
It was a serious relationship considering marriage, just that we hadn't found the right time, and the baby provided a good opportunity for us.
Just because there's a baby doesn't mean you have to marry, right, Catherine?
Suddenly addressed, I let out an "what?" as Rachel directed a sarcastic smile at me. I remembered a recent TV feature about single mothers we watched as a family. Indeed, having a baby doesn't necessarily equate to marriage, but I felt that wasn't the point here. Yes, indeed, just because there's a baby doesn't automatically mean marriage. Logan's face fell for a moment. I had anticipated that reaction. So I organized my thoughts before speaking, something I later wanted to boast to Logan about. But you two are choosing to move forward because of the baby. Regardless, it's a decision made by Logan and Anna together. It's not something anyone else can oppose. Rachel, shouldn't we just support Logan and his decisions? Everyone present might have thought it was just a careless statement from an old woman, but Rachel just drank her coffee in one gulp.
Catherine, please prepare more coffee.
After passing the cup, she crossed her arms and sighed.
Well, opposing it would be pointless, I guess. So when exactly do you plan to get married?
Oh, we want to do it soon, considering Anna's health.
I see. So for us, it's like finally stepping back from parenting.
Rachel said this thoughtfully, then turned to face me in the kitchen.
We're going to live with family from now on. So can our unwanted housekeeper please leave?
Excuse me.
Now that my son is getting married, we want to live with just our close family.
I was taken aback by Rachel's sudden words, and both Logan and Anna were left with their mouths open in surprise.
Once Logan's child is born, they will live here for a while. The baby's night crying might bother you, Catherine.
No, I'm fine with it. In fact, I want to help if I can.
But I see no advantage in living with someone who's likely to need caregiving soon. You're no longer needed. So, can you leave?
I felt heartbroken but managed a brave smile, not wanting to worry Logan and his family. At that time, I didn't take Rachel's words seriously. However, day by day, Rachel's efforts to drive me out became more overt, frequently saying, "Please leave soon." When I talked to John about it, he just looked troubled and remained silent. What shocked me was that Rachel was managing almost all of my late husband's estate, including the house. My husband, a doting father, had left everything to our son, John, meaning I practically owned nothing. And John, being under Rachel's influence, left me stunned, facing the loss of both home and property. What should I do now? I muttered while looking through old albums with my late husband at night. He was always gentle and never angry, just a calm person. I wondered if his nature had allowed Rachel to become so domineering, feeling like the root cause lay with both my late husband and myself. Months passed in this oppressive atmosphere, with Rachel's harassment continuing daily. I couldn't leave, enduring everything silently. One day, while I was showering, the water suddenly turned cold. Worried it was broken, it seemed Rachel had turned off the water heater. Thinking she didn't realize I was bathing, I turned it on again, only for it to be promptly turned off. When I asked her not to turn it off while I was bathing, she yelled, "It's a waste of electricity." Then I resorted to washing with the bath water, but soon, Rachel started draining the tub after her use, forcing me to wash in cold water even in winter. I was distraught and spoke to John, who weakly suggested, "Maybe bathe when Rachel is out." I sighed deeply, dismayed by his timidity. Rachel kept telling me, with a sneering laugh, "You should find an apartment and move out soon." I felt helpless against her words. Amidst these depressing days, a piece of bright news arrived today. Anna had given birth to a healthy baby. For a moment, Rachel and I joyfully celebrated together, both with tears in our eyes.
If only you would leave the house soon, I would truly be happy.
Rachel suddenly said with a cold look, after the shared joy. I doubted her character at that moment. Glancing at John, he appeared indifferent, purposely focusing on the newspaper's front page. Due to Rachel's insistence, Logan and his wife stayed in the family home, but Rachel, who had wanted to live together, showed no interest in caring for the baby. I did what I could to help Anna, who, despite being overwhelmed with caring for the baby, always expressed deep gratitude.
Thank you so much for everything.
Don't worry about it. You're going through the toughest time now. I'll do anything I can to help, just like a grandmother should. Those were my genuine feelings. After a really busy few months, Logan said to me without any premonition,
"I have something important to discuss."
"Can't we talk about it here?" I responded while cooking dinner, not stopping my hands as they chopped the ingredients, waiting for Logan to continue.
"I want to talk just with you, Grandma. There's a place I want you to come to this Sunday, without telling Mom and the others."
My hand holding the knife paused. "Without telling Rachel." As I turned to Logan, he had a subtle, happy expression, reminiscent of the secretive, pleased faces he used to make as a child when planning surprises for me and his late grandfather. Logan had always been close to us. And looking back, maybe Rachel felt that her only son's affection was being taken away by us, which might have been unpleasant for her. Perhaps Logan realized that being with Rachel meant I was too intimidated to speak, and he understood that. I felt touched by his kindness, and my affection for my gentle grandson and his wife grew even more. Next Sunday, Logan, Anna, and the baby took me to a newly built condominium complex, a short 10-minute walk from our house. As we walked, Logan shared that he had purchased the condo before the baby was born, encouraged to live with his family. I was astounded by his decisiveness in buying it without consulting Rachel and the others.
"Sorry to make you walk, Grandma."
"I need to keep my legs strong. Besides, this distance is nothing for me," I replied, patting my thin legs, though I felt pain in my knees even after just a short walk, deciding not to mention it. In a room of a brand new condo, there is a simple piece of furniture and cardboard boxes in the corner of the room. It seems to be the belongings of Anna, who used to live alone. Logan made coffee in the kitchen as if he was accustomed to the place. While Anna put the baby to sleep in another room, Logan, with a solemn look, started, "You know." I felt the ticking of the clock on the wall resonate unusually loud.
"Won't you live with us?"
His sudden proposal startled me. I almost dropped the mug I was holding. Logan looked at me earnestly. Thinking it was a joke, I smiled weakly, but Logan's gaze drifted off distantly.
I've always hated the way Mom had been treating you since I was a child.
Well, your mother is a bit strong-willed.
But you're always told to leave the house, and Dad never stands up to her. I can't bear to see you treated so poorly by Mom anymore.
I thought you were going to say something else, but that's not necessary.
Do you remember when I first said I wanted to introduce Anna? I mentioned something I had been thinking about.
I recalled him saying something like that. It was a while ago, but it left a strong impression on my memory because of the way Logan said it, with the implication that he was determined to do something upon his marriage.
I've been loved and cherished by you and Grandpa since I was little, and I loved you both so much. But I always felt Mom was very rude to you too, and I've wanted to help you ever since I became an adult.
Logan, did you really think that way? Leaning forward with resolve, Logan looked intently into my eyes.
Let's live together. There's no need for you to suffer alone in that house.
Speechless, Anna quietly returned from the other room and sat next to Logan. She had been listening from the next room and looked at me solemnly, understanding the conversation.
Logan has shared this with me. If you're okay with it, could you live with us?
What a kind offer. I'm truly touched, but I don't want to intrude on the life of a newlywed couple like you.
It's not an intrusion. We need your guidance in parenting, and having you live with us would be a great support.
And apparently Anna, too, had been harassed by Rachel a lot and had developed a feeling of dislike toward Rachel. She had been taunted about her shotgun marriage and had been yelled at to quiet the baby during nighttime crying fits. When Anna wanted to visit her parents' house after giving birth, Rachel retorted, "So you don't like being with me, I get it," making Anna repeatedly explain herself in frustration.
We're asking you, please, can you live with us?
Logan and Anna both pleaded at the same time. Silently looking down at their faces, I felt tears streaming down my face. Thank you. At that moment, no other words came to mind. And so, it was decided that I would live with Logan and his family. Of course, this news would soon reach Rachel's ears. As soon as I agreed to move in, Logan promptly informed Rachel and John. Something I had asked him to do. I was certain Rachel would strongly oppose it. Telling myself this was my final battle, I left Logan and his family at the condo and returned home, opening the front door. Rachel, who had called me into the living room as soon as I got back, started yelling furiously.
What's this about, Catherine? You're not seriously considering living with Logan, are you?
No, I'm thinking of accepting Logan's kind offer.
You can't be serious.
Rachel scoffed. Next to her, John frowned, looking troubled.
It's absurd to think of moving in with a newlywed couple. It's clear you'd be a burden to Logan.
Yes, I was worried about that too, but they both have accepted me. I want to honor their feelings.
What are you saying? John, say something.
John, who had been silent, looked at Rachel with vacant eyes, seeming completely drained.
Rachel, I want a divorce.
What? I thought you were talking about something else.
I can't take it anymore, this life.
Wait.
The usually calm John raised his voice, causing Rachel to flinch. He stood up, confronting Rachel with a stern look.
I can't continue with you. Your treatment of me is one thing, but what you've done to Mom is unforgivable.
What the heck, John? Don't start yelling now. We're talking about Logan living with Mom, right?
Mom will live with Logan. That's settled. Now it's about you and me. I can't live with you anymore.
Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden?
I've tolerated your behavior since Mom had been putting up with it. But if she's moving out to live with Logan, it changes things. It's our issue now. I've wanted to divorce you for a long time, with all your suspicious behavior and alleged affairs since we were young.
I didn't do such things.
Rachel, unusually unsettled, darted her eyes around. John had always been gentle, but as a child, he was untamable when angered. Rachel probably had never seen John angry. He tended to prepare meticulously to confront someone when angry. John carelessly pulled a large brown envelope from his work bag and spread it on the table. It was an infidelity investigation report from years ago, clearly proving Rachel's affairs without even needing to read the details. Rachel sat down, dumbstruck. John said nothing more and walked to his room. I noticed the living room curtains fluttering. The window was open, and I felt a soft breeze. I wondered if our embarrassing conversation had been overheard by the neighbors and held my temple. Rachel, I can't say much about you and John, but you two need to have a serious talk. Rachel remained silent, just sitting there. After refusing to divorce, Rachel took it to court, but the infidelity investigation was the final blow, and the divorce was finalized. I heard through the grapevine that Rachel remained aggressive after the divorce, gradually pushing people away and leading a lonely life. By the time the divorce was finalized, I had already been living with Logan and his family for 6 months, helping with the great-grandchild's care and feeling happy every day. Then one day,
Grandma, Dad is here.
Returning from a walk with the great-grandchild, I found John sitting solemnly in the living room. It had been half a year since I had seen my son, and he looked somewhat healthier. After putting the great-grandchild to bed, I smiled at John. Getting more sleep now that you're divorced?
Thanks to you, I can sleep for 8 hours.
John said this with a brightness I hadn't seen before. I remembered my son always had this innocent smile, even if he had aged and grown a beard, reminding me of his younger days and making me chuckle. So, what brings you here today? You're not going to say you want to live with us, are you?
Well, that's actually why I came. Of course, I'll contribute to the new home expenses.
That's only right. You've learned to manage your finances properly after the divorce.
I've already discussed it with Logan and Anna. I plan to buy this apartment with the inheritance left by our late father in a way that they agree with. Now, I can take care of you, Mom.
John was never weak, just timid by nature. His decision after the divorce was a result of careful consideration about his future. Looking at my son, grandson, Anna, and great-grandchild in turn, I closed my eyes. I saw my late husband's image in the back of my eyes, smiling gently as if to say, "Isn't that nice?" What's nice about it? I went through so much trouble. If you had lived longer, I might have been happier. But then I reconsidered. My current happiness was thanks to Logan and Anna, who had wished for it. My gratitude for these two was beyond words. Suddenly, the great-grandchild started crying loudly, and I quickly went to the crib, lifting the child into my arms. After a few gentle rocks, the great-grandchild settled comfortably and fell asleep in my arms.
You know, I'm giving you that failure. So let's get a divorce.
What?
A dumb mother and a dumb son. Just perfect, huh? Since you won't agree to a divorce, I'll just leave on my own.
With that, he handed me the divorce papers. Ever since our kids were little, my husband only praised our eldest, John, for his good grades and always put down our second son, Mike. Of course, I didn't want to lose John, but he got into a private high school, and I couldn't afford to send him there on my salary alone. It was an utterly unacceptable situation, but I had no choice but to accept it. And so, life with Mike began.
He's not interested in the mediocre and failures, huh? He actually said that.
It's okay. You have hidden talents. Just you wait and see. I said, raising Mike to be someone to be proud of. Then, 7 years later, a man came to visit me.
It's been a while. 1,000 employees, huh? That's incredible. I had no idea you'd started a business and made it a success.
That's right. But you've got the wrong person to talk to.
Huh?
I'm the CEO, but this company is. I'm a 34-year-old housewife living in New York. I got married 3 years ago and have been a stay-at-home wife since. Rather than being allowed to, it's more accurate to say I became a housewife at my husband's strong insistence. We met at the same workplace, dated for a year, and then decided to get married. Our relationship was well known, and when we announced our marriage, all our colleagues celebrated with us. That's why we discussed our future life in detail. I was thinking of working even after we get married, at least until we have kids. I think it would be troublesome for our colleagues if I just quit suddenly. I plan to keep working for a few years.
No. After we're married, I need you to be a stay-at-home wife. You want to work. Are you trying to embarrass me?
Embarrass you? I'm not intending to. But do I have to be a stay-at-home wife? It's quite normal these days. Many young couples both work, and there are even those who return to work after having kids.
Working even though we're married. It's like saying my earnings are bad. Everyone at work, the neighbors, my friends, they'll all laugh at me. That's out of the question.
Indeed, some people might think that way. But I wished he'd look at the reality rather than what people might think. We don't work for a big corporation, so our salaries aren't that high. We could live on my husband's salary alone if we don't live luxuriously. We talked about wanting kids, and it would be better to have as much savings as possible for the future. I thought my salary could go entirely into savings if we could live on my husband's salary alone. But he prioritized his pride over our life together and refused to live as a dual-income family. But considering the future.
If you really want to work, quit your current job and look for something you can do from home. That way, no one will know you're working.
It's not that easy.
Since we can live on my salary alone, there's no need to be so selfish.
That was true. But I wasn't just talking about the present. Before we got married, he was really kind, and I never thought we'd have such a problem right after getting married. I regret a bit not discussing more about the future before deciding to marry. But it's too late for regrets, and I can't continue working if he's so against it. We weren't in a hurry to have kids anyway, so I decided to take my time looking for a work-from-home job. The financial issue could be resolved little by little. That was my initial thought. Then, about half a year later, I found a work-from-home job, and I've been busy every day, balancing it with housework.
I'm home.
Hi there. Guess what? It looks like I'm pregnant.
Pregnant?
Yes. It means we're going to be a family of 3. I'm so happy. I had wanted to wait a bit longer before getting pregnant, but I was truly happy. I had heard stories from other expectant mothers, so I knew it would be tough going forward. But the joy of finally being pregnant with our long-awaited child was far greater. The first part was tough with morning sickness, but I wasn't too badly affected physically, so I managed to keep up with the housework. My husband was busy with work and seldom helped out or showed much consideration for me, but somehow we managed, so I didn't see it as a huge problem. After our first child was born, life with our adorable baby was truly enjoyable. But at the same time, I personally experienced the difficulties of parenting.
I'm going out for drinks again tonight, so don't bother making dinner. I'm off tomorrow, so I'll probably be back in the morning.
Hey, you've been going out a lot lately. Don't you think you should spend some time with our child? I'm exhausted from the nightly crying. I have to always watch the baby and do the housework. No matter how much time and energy I have, it's not enough. You just do whatever you want. It's unbelievable.
Going out is part of my job. You can't restrict me. Besides, I'm spending my own money, so you shouldn't have any complaints. Parenting is the mother's job, so fulfill your duty.
As a mother, I understand I have a responsibility to raise our child. But that responsibility also lies with my husband, the father. Why should only the mother be responsible for parenting? Both parents have an equal responsibility to raise their child, and having a job isn't an excuse to neglect that. I have housework, but I'm also parenting, so I wish my husband would participate in parenting despite his job. But no matter what I said, my husband continued to act selfishly. This is where our marital troubles began to worsen, and then I found out I was pregnant with our second child. We hadn't been intimate much, so I was very surprised by the pregnancy, but the thought of having another child was a happy one. However, my husband said,
We can't afford to raise a second child. It might be harsh, but wouldn't it be better if it went to heaven?
Wait, are you telling me not to have the baby? Don't joke about this.
It can't be helped. We don't have the time or the resources to raise 2 children. Face reality.
It's our responsibility since we made the child, so we need to take responsibility and raise it no matter what. If you cut down on your hobbies, like cars, going out, fishing, and golf, we could easily find the funds to raise a second child. I yelled at him loudly after this statement. Enough with the jokes. What does he think about our children? I won't allow him to refuse to have our child for selfish reasons. After a big fight with my husband over this, we barely spoke, but I went ahead with the pregnancy against his wishes. The second pregnancy was physically harder than the first, and the days were mentally tough. But seeing my child's face after giving birth made all the hardships disappear. Like with the first, I vowed to raise this child responsibly. As they grew, they quickly became elementary school students.
I'm home, Mom. I'm back.
Hi, both of you. How did you do in school?
No problems at all. I got A's in all subjects.
Well done.
I didn't do so well. I tried, but I'm just not good at studying.
I never intended to compare my children. John has his strengths, and Mike has his. I never wanted to favor one over the other, but academically, John was more gifted. Despite not studying much at home, John's test results were perfect. At parent-teacher conferences, I heard nothing but stories of his excellence. However, despite Mike's efforts, his grades weren't as good. But I saw him working hard on his homework and studies every day, and I wasn't focused solely on the results. Both of you did well. It might not have turned out as hoped, but results aren't everything. Let's try again next term. Though getting straight A's is truly amazing.
It's because you're always so lenient that he doesn't improve. If you can't get good grades, don't you think that's a failure? That's why I said we shouldn't have had him.
Hey, don't say things like that in front of the kids.
But it's the truth, right? John is so smart, but Mike. Maybe it's because he was conceived when our marriage was starting to fail. Maybe he's not even my child. Maybe that's why he's a failure.
Don't joke around. There are things you should and shouldn't say in front of the kids. They might still be young, but they are already elementary school students. They are old enough to understand what their father is saying, and I felt a deep anger towards my husband from the bottom of my heart, but I couldn't let the children see us in a shameful argument any further. I tried to stay calm, but lately, these kinds of remarks have been increasing. My husband judges our children solely based on their results, and Mike has been hurt by his words. Of course, John said he didn't feel good hearing his brother being criticized even though he was praised.
Dad, I just happen to be good at studying. You have to acknowledge his effort.
If the results don't show, then the effort means nothing. At the Olympics, only the gold medalists are praised, but no one values the athletes who trained even harder but didn't win. The world isn't kind, and those who can't produce results are worthless.
I don't think my view is the only correct one. There's room for the kind of result-focused thinking my husband has, and I don't outright reject that perspective. However, I believe it's wrong not to acknowledge their efforts at all. It demotivates the children and diminishes their confidence. Then, even a child who could have been encouraged to try hard might end up not trying at all. To avoid making them feel like their efforts are meaningless, I continued to care for Mike's emotional well-being. However,
You know, I've been thinking of putting that kid into an institution. I don't plan on wasting any more money on someone who can't even bring home decent grades.
what? I was shocked by my husband's son's suggestion, but it seemed he was talking about Mike. Putting him into an institution. What is he thinking? I would never do such a thing. It's true that Mike's grades aren't as good as John's. But there are things you should say and things you shouldn't. Doesn't he understand that as a human being? If there were truly insurmountable reasons we couldn't take care of him, I'd understand. And it's not that I think putting a child in an institution is abandoning them. There are various circumstances where people who want to take care of their children themselves can't. But my husband's reasoning is just selfish and utterly unacceptable. What does he think about his own children? Don't be ridiculous. There are things you shouldn't say.
Am I wrong? It's the fault of those who can achieve results, right? If you're so protective, why don't you take care of him yourself?
How can you say that? Where's your responsibility as a parent?
I'm sick of living with you anyway. Why don't you just take that idiot and raise him yourself?
After saying that, he went back to his room. I was speechless. Even as a joke, that's something you can't say. Ever since before Mike was born, he had been negative about the pregnancy. And after Mike was born, he always compared him to John. The atmosphere at home was truly bad, and since then, we hardly spoke to each other. My husband neglected our family and did whatever he liked, so time passed without any major issues in our household. And before we knew it, John was nearing the age to graduate from middle school. Then, one day,
Hey, sign this.
what? A divorce paper. We hadn't spoken about anything other than necessities, and most of our communication was through text, so I was surprised when he suddenly spoke to me. I was speechless. He wants a divorce. But why now? Certainly, our relationship as a couple had cooled off, and there was no warmth in our family. But until now, he had been doing whatever he wanted, and I had been paying for Mike's tutoring and extracurricular activities with my income from working at home. We had been living without any complaints from each other. What changed for him?
I don't intend to waste any more money, and I don't need failures.
What do you mean?
I have no intention of continuing our married life. I want to remarry with my new girlfriend.
What? I was shocked and wide-eyed at his statement. Unexpectedly, he had been having an affair. Why? I found myself at a loss for words, taking time to sort out my thoughts. However, our marital relationship was virtually non-existent, and the only reason I had continued our marriage was for the sake of our children. If it weren't for them, I would have divorced him immediately. Although I wasn't saddened by the affair itself, I was infuriated by his irresponsibility in crossing an unforgivable line and then wanting a divorce. How dare you be so selfish? What do you think your position is?
It's my life, so I'll do as I please. Plus, I'm leaving the failure with you.
The failure. Could it be that he intends to raise our eldest himself, but expects me to take care of our youngest? They are both middle schoolers. That's not something we can decide without discussing it with them. Surely, he favors our academically gifted eldest. But what does our eldest think of a father who neglects his family for an affair? You would figure that out with a bit of thought. You're trying to make everything go your way, but that's not possible, right? The kids aren't pawns for you to manipulate.
Then let me tell you. Can you support him on your salary alone since he got into a private high school?
That's...
If you consider his future, my proposal is the best, isn't it? I'll leave the failure with you. So no division of assets, and we'll each raise one kid. Oh, and if you try to claim alimony for the affair, you know what will happen, right? He can't go to that private high school if the money's gone.
His words felt like a threat. Indeed, he wasn't wrong. Our eldest had passed the exams for a prestigious private high school. If we divorced now, who would pay for that education? A person who cheats so easily. If I claimed child support, he could easily cut off contact and leave us in the lurch. I can't trust a cheater. Yet, if I don't agree to the divorce, he'll just leave on his own. After much thought, I had no choice but to believe his method was the best course of action. I'm truly sorry for everything turning out this way. I'm a failure as a parent, but I'll do whatever I can for you, and I'll respect your choices.
All right, then I'll live with Dad until I graduate from high school. I'll keep in touch with you, Mom, so don't worry.
Are you sure about this?
Of course. Well, Dad probably just wants to keep me, the one with good grades, close to him.
My eldest decided to live with his father. If that's his wish, I won't stop him. Going with his father might also reflect his determination to attend the private school he was accepted into. 3 months later, everything was settled, and I moved to a cheaper apartment with my youngest, while my husband continued living with our eldest. I then started working more seriously, and although my earnings weren't high, they were enough to support my youngest and me.
I'll start working after graduating from high school. Just like Dad said, I can't do anything right. It'd be pointless to go to college.
Don't listen to what he says. You don't need to care about that.
But
it's okay. You'll see. You have your own talents, and there's nothing to worry about. Being abandoned by his father made him doubt his talents and lose confidence, but I knew he had hidden abilities. To support him, I wanted him to go to high school and develop his strengths, working hard to make him forget about his father. As my youngest neared high school graduation,
Mom, are you really going to support me?
Of course, you have talents, so work hard to develop them. I'll take care of you to a certain extent and clean up any mess, so don't worry.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
After high school, my youngest started working as a freelance engineer. Ever since elementary school, he had a real knack for science and math. However, despite his exceptional skills in these areas, his overall grades were below average because he didn't score well in regular tests. My ex-husband never looked closely enough to see Mike's unique talents and looked down on him as a failure, but I knew better. After middle school, I enrolled him in a high school with a focus on engineering. There, his talents flourished, and he gained enough skills to be considered more than competent as an engineer before even graduating.
I just landed a really good project.
Really? That's awesome.
I was also asked by a previous client to work with them again. It's been super busy, but every day is fun.
I was really happy to see my younger son, Mike, so lively and thriving as an engineer. It was a matter of pride for me too. Eventually, Mike built connections with various companies, and soon, he had too much work to handle on his own, so he started delegating tasks to fellow engineers. That's when I started a company to take on IT projects, managing the business myself. Before I knew it, 5 years had flown by. One day,
Ma'am, there's a visitor here to see you. Did you have an appointment?
An appointment? No, I didn't. I hadn't scheduled any visits, so I was a bit put off. Who could it be? But then, the moment I heard the visitor's name, I felt a chill. Still, it wouldn't be right to just send him away, so I asked to have him shown to my office.
It's been a while. You're doing well, I see. Here, I brought some treats for you and your staff to enjoy.
To my surprise, it was my ex-husband, someone I neither wanted to see nor hear from. The shock of hearing his name and then seeing him in person was something else. I guess he had heard about Mike and me running a business and decided it was time to come back into our lives. Really, after all this time? What do you want? I have no business with you, and I didn't want you to come.
Don't be like that. We haven't seen each other in so long. Let's at least have a little catch-up. Are you running the business all by yourself, or?
He hadn't apologized for leaving us or for the divorce. It seemed like he thought enough time had passed that everything was okay now. But no apology for his past actions. It seemed he hadn't learned or reflected on anything after all this time. I was quite disappointed. If he was going to bring a peace offering, the least he could do was apologize for his actions. But perhaps he still thought he did nothing wrong. Either way, I was appalled. But as I sat there in silence, dumbfounded, the office door opened and someone walked in.
Long time no see, so now you're broke and dumped by your woman, clinging to straws by coming to Mom.
Wait, what? Why are you here?
My ex-husband was bewildered to see our eldest son, John, whom he hadn't expected. About a year ago, John had contacted me. He said that he was now estranged from his father, who had no job, had been left by his second wife, and was drowning in debt.
I don't understand. Why?
I called him here. Thought it was time for a long overdue reunion.
What?
And to think, I was the successful student you thought would become your ADM, but you were betrayed by me, lost your job because of an affair, got sued for alimony by your next wife, and now you're in debt. How does that feel?
What are you trying to do here?
Initially confused, my ex-husband's confusion quickly turned to anger. When John first reached out to me a year ago, I was shocked. I knew he had planned to cut ties with his father after graduating high school. This wasn't surprising to hear, as it was something I was told at the time of our divorce. But what shocked me was what happened after. So, you went to college but dropped out because he opposed what you wanted to do.
Yo, even after he paid for my private high school and college, quitting was unthinkable to him. But I was drawn to the job I had been doing part-time, and the company offered me a full-time position. I didn't need college anymore.
All I did was for your own good. How is that wrong? After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. You have no right to complain.
I don't want to hear anything from someone who abandoned their family. And if you're so into tough love, why did you only invest in me? Thought you only had one son, huh?
John's direct confrontation left my ex-husband speechless. It turned out, after investing all his hopes and resources into John, they ended up estranged. It was a failed investment with no returns, just like a bad gamble. A year ago, when John decided to leave his job and inform me about his father's situation, I was taken aback. Just when we were looking to expand our business, and given that my eldest son had experience in IT sales, I decided to have him work with us. And today, my ex-husband showed up.
So, what brings a man who easily betrays his family here now? Thinking you can get a piece of the success you once looked down on is quite audacious, isn't it?
Well,
no one's going to clean up after you. Someone who's only acted for their own benefit throughout their life has no right to expect help now. You've always been selfish, so it's about time you take responsibility for yourself. Being without money, family, and suffering and loneliness now is the result of your past actions, so you better accept it.
My ex-husband, faced with the hard truth from our son, clenched his fists and glared, but couldn't come up with any rebuttal. John probably knew he would be used for what he could offer in the future. Despite being children of the same father, the treatment John and his brother received was markedly different. John was praised for his achievements and good grades, while his brother was constantly put down. I believe no child dislikes being praised by their parent, but my ex-husband's arrival was merely to assess his children as tools. The lack of love was something the children understood better than anyone. My ex-husband hardly spent any money on the family, yet he didn't hesitate to send John to a private high school and pay for college. But all that was merely an investment for his future. He wanted to reap the benefits when my son started earning, not necessarily wishing for his son to have a good life. That's why, during our divorce, he chose to take only John, knowing fully well what he was doing. It seems John had already figured this out by the time of our divorce and decided to use his father to his advantage.
You might think you're heading for a hellish life, but that's none of my concern. You're going to struggle, but good luck with that.
I didn't come here for you. Shut up, traitor.
Well, you came to see me, right? So, what do you want?
After everything, I've reflected on a lot. And you haven't remarried, right? You must be worried about your future. So I thought, maybe we could get back together.
Get back together? It's astounding how audacious that sounds. I wish he would stop joking around. I've been thinking, shouldn't an apology come first? The lack of an apology, coupled with the audacity to suggest getting back together just because I haven't remarried, as if doing me a favor, is infuriating. Who does he think he is? Becoming a company president must have made me look quite attractive to you, huh? But let me make it clear, I have no intention of getting back with someone who betrayed us. Don't get it twisted. I want nothing to do with you for the rest of my life. No matter what, I have no plans to involve myself with such a person. Don't be mistaken. I can live perfectly fine without him, and there's no need for me to show him any pity. I can't trust you as a person, and once someone betrays me, that's it. It's your life, so take care of it yourself.
You don't have to be so harsh. We were married for over 10 years. Have you forgotten that?
After you destroyed a relationship of over 10 years with your selfishness, there's no going back. You chose to leave us, so if you have regrets, blame your past foolish decisions. With that, I called security. My ex-husband kept begging until the very end, but eventually, he was escorted out by security. I didn't let my younger son meet him due to the trauma, but when I told him about the visit, he laughed. It must have been satisfying to get even with someone who had looked down on him. While I handle the business side of things, it's my younger son who scouts and trains talented engineers. And my eldest son secures big contracts one after another. Now we've grown into a large company with over 1,000 employees, managing the business as a family. As for my ex-husband, he was kicked out of his apartment afterward, disdained by his parents, and now lives a day-to-day life through odd jobs. No one's willing to help someone like him, and he'll continue to struggle, but it's entirely his own doing. He can spend the rest of his life regretting his actions. I plan to keep valuing my family and living our best lives, and protecting the company my sons and I have grown together, and striving every day.
Soon, Mom will let me take over the company. The way she talks, Dad's will must have written that I should inherit the estate and the company. Otherwise, she wouldn't let me get away with so much.
One day, when I happened to finish work early and came home, I heard the voices of Michael, who was supposed to be at work, and his wife, Cindy, arguing. It was clear they hadn't noticed I was back. It seems they planned to deceive me and take all the inheritance left by George for themselves. Without being noticed, I left the scene and went back to the office. Once back, I took out the will from George that I had stored in a drawer. No matter how many times I checked, the contents were the same. Michael is misunderstanding this fact, thinking everything will be his. He's walking around with a big head now, but he doesn't yet know the path of ruin that awaits him. My name is Susan, and I'm 55 years old. I'm currently working as the CEO of a cosmetics company. I only took over this company 6 months ago, though. My husband George had established and managed the company. George had suffered a major illness and passed away 6 months ago. Originally an employee at the company, I married George, who was the owner. I continued to work at his side as an employee. However, I never imagined I would suddenly be entrusted with running the company. When George was close to passing, he asked me to continue the company. I couldn't just ignore the wishes of my beloved George. I was just about to discuss the future of the company when I decided to honor his request. The day after hearing my decision, George passed away peacefully. However, I was not allowed the time to immerse myself in memories or even to grieve. The fate of the company and its employees was now in my hands. Fortunately, the employees were very helpful in preparing for the funeral. Even though I thought I was acting as usual, I was grateful for their offer, as I often felt out of sorts and anxious. The warmth of the people gathered was undoubtedly due to George's personality. After all, I myself had married him because I was drawn to his character. Once the funeral was over, based on the personnel decisions George had previously made, I restructured the company. George's management was brilliant, and it was clear he had made many considerations to make my job easier than ever. Even though it was for my sake, the reorganization was done with the consent of the other employees. Thanks to this, there were no complaints from anyone. Thus, the company was able to make a fresh start. It was about 6 months after George had passed away. I had an unexpected visitor.
It's been a while, Mom.
On a holiday, the sudden visitor was my only son, Michael. It had been a full 8 years since I last saw Michael's face. Seeing one's own son after 8 years is unheard of in a normal family. Indeed, there was a deep reason for this. It all started 8 years ago, when George was still alive. At that time, Michael, a college student, had moved out to live on his own. He did not work part-time because he said his studies were too demanding, and George covered all his living expenses. In hindsight, this was a bit abnormal, and I realize now that we were too indulgent. When you really think about it, it's implausible for a college student to be so busy with studies that he can't even work part-time. Far from his studies being demanding, Michael wasn't even attending college. To be more precise, he had dropped out without discussing it with us. All the tuition we had paid was actually received by Michael, who used it along with the money we sent him as living expenses. And when I say living expenses, most of it was not used properly. It's a common tale among college students, but Michael had fallen into a life soaked in gambling. One day, a collection letter from a financial company arrived demanding repayment from Michael, and that's when we discovered everything. By the time we realized it, Michael's debts had ballooned to an amount no college student could handle. George was furious when he found out, but as a parent, he took on the responsibility and paid off all of Michael's debts. Despite this, Michael shamelessly claimed that everything was our fault.
I turned out this way because of you. I didn't do anything wrong.
Hearing this, George finally kicked Michael out of the house. It wasn't quite disownment, but it was effectively a severance of ties. Since then, Michael had disappeared from our lives. Naturally, he did not show up at George's funeral, and we couldn't even inform him. We didn't even know where Michael was living or his contact details. And yet, here he was, appearing suddenly. Apparently, he had somehow heard that George had passed away. Despite my misgivings, I couldn't just turn away my own son, and reluctantly invited Michael into the room.
I'll take over Dad's company.
As soon as he entered the room and sat down, Michael started talking fast. From the moment I saw Michael, I kind of expected it, but hearing it from him directly made me feel even heavier.
We haven't cut off our ties as parent and child, right? So, I should have the right to inherit the company and receive the estate.
Your first conversation with your mother after 8 years is about money and the company. At least you could have paid respects to George's memorial portrait. In the end, Michael never once paid his respects in front of George's memorial throughout his visit. Michael continued his one-sided conversation, repeatedly insisting on his rights. During this, I learned that Michael now had a wife and a child.
Now that I am a father, I am different from before. I want to exercise my rights for my family.
Michael was adamant. But, frankly, I didn't want to continue the conversation with Michael any longer that day. I can't decide anything right now, and I have work later, so let's pick another day. Somehow I managed to send Michael away, but my heart was filled with anxiety. Honestly, if I just ignored him the next time he showed up, he might give up and never come back. But there was a reason I just couldn't ignore Michael. It was written in a letter left by George. Although he hadn't said it directly to me, it seemed he really needed to convey it. The letter read, "Please forgive Michael." Though he had kicked Michael out, George clearly still had regrets about his son. I had been puzzled why George had never mentioned Michael till the end, but he entrusted Michael's future to me through this letter. Despite everything written in the letter, I couldn't abandon Michael at this point. I made up my mind and decided to wait for the next time Michael would visit. Just 2 days later, Michael came to my place. This time, it wasn't just Michael. His wife Cindy and his son Kevin were with him. Kevin was my grandson, but strangely, I felt no deep emotion seeing him. He was just 3 years old and adorable, but I still felt like he was someone else's child. Cindy was 24, 4 years younger than Michael, a typical young woman of today. She probably didn't feel much reality in the fact that I was Michael's mother either. She wasn't nervous and didn't seem to be trying to flatter me at all.
How about it? Your grandson is cute, right?
Michael said proudly, but my feelings remained unchanged. We exchanged a brief introductory conversation before getting right to the main point.
So, about me taking over the company.
I summarized the content of George's letter and told Michael. Almost immediately, a sly smile began to form on Michael and Cindy's faces. But I can't decide right now, and it's not something I can decide on my own. Upon hearing my words, their expressions quickly turned to irritation.
Are you saying you'll ignore Dad's last will? Then let us live here so you won't betray us, Mom. You're all alone now, and you must be worried, right?
That sounds good.
Cindy quickly agreed to Michael's unilateral declaration. It seemed they had already decided this between themselves before. The conversation was forcefully pushed forward as if my refusal was not allowed. When mentioned that there was a will from George, I couldn't say I disliked the idea. Before I knew it, the moving arrangements were underway, and within a week, the three of them were set to descend upon us. What exactly is their aim? Sadly, these were the feelings I held towards Michael. Naturally, everyone at the company had a negative opinion of him. There was absolutely no intention to hand over the company itself, and there were numerous opinions against bringing Michael, who had been missing for 8 years, into the company. Everyone said they understood George's wishes, but that it was far too risky. Caught in the middle, I was left deeply troubled. Now, the three who moved into my place were also causing me distress.
We have work, so.
They started leaving Kevin at a child care facility on my dime and wouldn't return until late at night.
My dad thought of me when he left that will.
Using that as an excuse, Michael began to rely almost entirely on me for his living. Despite supposedly working from morning till night, they paid no living expenses. Even though I felt doubts and dissatisfaction with this arrangement, I couldn't speak up. Living together, I noticed that Cindy seemed to be juggling several jobs. The laundry included uniforms that seemed to be from a restaurant and work clothes from a factory. Despite her youth, she appeared to be overworking. "Ain't you working too hard?" One day, unable to bear it any longer, I ventured to ask. Then, Cindy gave a slight laugh and said softly,
"It can't be helped."
Her words could have been taken in any way, but somehow, any bad feelings I had towards her disappeared. It was true that they were relying on what George left behind, but the extent of her exertion revealed Cindy's fundamentally earnest nature. However, my feelings towards Michael remained unchanged. I wondered, had I ever been this detached from my son when we lived together? No, that couldn't be. It was because Michael was so dear to us that George and I had listened to his wishes. We were both working, so we found ourselves frequently having to leave the house. We did everything we could as a form of compensation. These actions were undoubtedly out of love. What had changed was not us, but Michael. Although there was a blood connection, the Michael now was a complete stranger to me. Living under the same roof again made this clear. He showed no affection towards his father George, and even after a considerable time since arriving, he hadn't once paid respects at the memorial. In the midst of such a life, one day I managed to leave work early. On that day, despite being tasked with Kevin's care every day, I returned home, my heart racing with excitement at the prospect of finally having some time to relax. I noticed Michael and Cindy's shoes at the entrance, even though they were supposed to be at work. I could hear their voices inside, confirming they were at home.
It's okay. Soon Mom will let me take over the company. With the way she talked, Dad's will must have written that I should inherit the estate and the company. Otherwise, she wouldn't let me do whatever I want like this.
Michael said with a hint of anger in his tone.
Still, wouldn't it be good to try working seriously for once? Do you even realize how much debt you're in? Even after Kevin was born, it's been gambling, nothing's changed.
It seemed like they were arguing and hadn't noticed that I had come home.
That's why we left that rundown place and pushed ourselves onto Mom. If I say it will work out, it will. You just need to keep quiet and follow me.
After Michael's outburst, a loud bang echoed in the room as he probably hit the table. Unnoticed by them, I quietly closed the door and headed back to the office. Finally, Michael's intentions were clear. He planned to take everything from me for himself. As I reread George's letters, I made up my mind. I should abandon the three of them and leave this house now. From their conversation, it was apparent that their life was a mess. Just like his student days, still indulging in gambling and covered in debt. Not working, completely depending on Cindy's meager earnings. Although he left the house, somewhere in his mind he probably thought he could always rely on his parents if things got tough, and had lived up to now with that belief. When their life became unsustainable, unexpectedly, what seemed like good news to Michael had arrived. From these facts, it was clear that if I left the house, their lives would quickly collapse, and they would be lost. However, my decision remained unchanged. I was done letting them mess up my life. With my mind made up, I explained the situation to a few longtime colleagues and headed home. As expected, Michael was out pretending to go to work. During his absence, with help from my colleagues, I moved out all the furniture from the house. We decided to temporarily store these items at the office, essentially clearing out the house. Seeing this, they will realize quickly that I have left. Sure enough, not long after moving the furniture, Michael called.
Mom, what the heck is going on? Why is all the furniture gone from the house?
The moment I answered the phone, Michael's furious voice came through. In the background, I could hear Cindy's flustered voice and Kevin crying.
Why would you do this? Dad told you, right, to leave me various things.
As expected, Michael began to claim that he had a right to George's estate. Hawk the Wool didn't mention leaving any property to you, Michael. With my reply, I could tell that Michael was stunned on the other end.
What are you talking about? You think you can just leave and then hog Dad's estate for yourself?
Hogging or not, George's letter clearly stated, all the company and estate go to Susan. But it was understandable why Michael would think that way.
Please forgive Michael.
George had indeed asked this of me. However, everything he left behind was meant for me. The money and the company were all mine. The letter did say, take care of Michael, but that was a separate matter.
Just come back quickly. Otherwise, I'll sue you.
Right now, no matter how much I explain, Michael isn't going to listen. He's convinced that I've run off with the company and estate that he was supposed to inherit.
See, I told you relying on Susan for everything wouldn't fundamentally solve anything.
Cindy's anguished cry leaked through the phone, having guessed the situation. The reason I struggled until the end to abandon the three of them was because of Cindy. It seemed that George's wishes were unilateral, but ultimately, he left the decision to me. He worried that after his death, I would carry the burden of being a mother who abandoned her son. Of course, he also had regrets about Michael, but his true intention was concern for me. Reuniting with Michael honestly stirred my emotions. In fact, I had accepted their whims and welcomed them back home. I repeated George's words over and over in my mind, agonizing over them. Forgiving Michael was supposed to relieve my mental burden. Ignoring George's feelings was difficult for me. However, accepting Michael as he was would ruin my life, of that I was certain. To truly honor George's wishes, I should make a choice that benefits me. I had made a decision, but Cindy was still a concern. Surely, Michael had ruined her life by dragging her around. Thinking about this made me hesitate in my decision. But I couldn't waver here. I steeled my heart against Cindy's cries and Michael's ranting, and hung up the phone. The day after I left the house, unbelievably, Michael stormed into the office. I had anticipated that he knew which company it was since he learned of George's decease. However, I never expected him to just barge in like this. Michael appeared with Cindy and Kevin in tow.
An appointment? I'm the heir to this company. Just call my mom.
After receiving a plea for help from the receptionist, I headed to the lobby. Michael, it seemed, had not given up yet. As he recognized me, Michael charged at me with incredible force.
You betrayer. Shame on you. How could you abandon your son and grandson? And to top it off, you take all of Dad's estate for yourself.
Most people in the company were aware of the company's policies and Michael's situation since George's decease. However, nobody had anticipated that he would confront us directly like this. Everyone could only watch in stunned silence at the bizarre scene unfolding.
Sure, Dad might have intended to give all the money to my mom. But as Dad's son, I should have the right to inherit this company.
In a normal parent-child relationship, he might have had the right to make such a claim. But Michael had no right to take over the company that belonged to me and George. Even if George had wished for Michael to be the next president, things wouldn't proceed that easily. The opinions of the staff and executives who have supported the company up to now are respected, as is common sense. Without their approval, naturally, it would be impossible to entrust a company to him. If such tyranny were allowed, the company would quickly lose its people. Michael must know the impracticality of what he's demanding. When he was kicked out of the house, he should have realized all of this. But he felt he had no choice. To escape a life drowned in debt, he had to push the limits.
If you say you won't let me take over the company, I'll sue you right now. Cindy, say something.
Perhaps frustrated by my silence, Michael turned to Cindy. Kevin, witnessing his father's bizarre behavior, was crying bitterly. As Cindy gently stroked Kevin's head, she stepped forward.
The one I really need to talk to is you. Enough is enough.
Her pained cry echoed in the lobby, silencing the area for a moment. Michael seemed unable to comprehend Cindy's words.
Huh? What are you saying? You agreed to follow me for Kevin's sake, didn't you?
Michael said mockingly. From this, I was certain. Indeed, Cindy felt trapped and couldn't leave Michael. Perhaps it was her sense of responsibility as a mother. I empathized deeply with Cindy's feelings, as I too struggled with whether to abandon Michael.
Even if you could take over the company, you couldn't handle it. Ever since we met, you hardly worked and were always gambling. Tomorrow will change, tomorrow will change. What was I? Who believed in that?
Tears welled up in Cindy's eyes.
Indeed, I was foolish. Foolish to have fallen for someone like you.
Kevin, looking up at his tearful mother, voiced his concern.
Mom, are you okay? Please don't cry.
To his question, Cindy responded while stroking his head.
Kevin, I'm sorry. From today, it's just going to be the two of us.
Her voice was weak, yet I could sense her firm resolve.
Michael, I am going to live for myself from now on, and I will take full responsibility for raising Kevin. We're done.
The employees, inadvertently caught in this drama, were unable to make a sound, stunned by the unbelievable unfolding before them. Michael, there's no reason for you to stop Cindy. She's long realized that you can't do anything on your own. In fact, your presence makes everyone miserable. These aren't words one should say to their own son, I'm well aware. But I hope my feelings, having to say such things, are understood. I don't need to please anyone. But to the employees watching, I make my silent excuses. There is nothing left for you here. Leave now. If you can't even do that, I will call the police. Michael's face, filled with anger, turned to despair upon hearing the word police. He's been threatened by his own mother to be turned over to the police. For Michael, who's a bit of a softy at heart, that fact was enough to shatter his spirit. Well, it seems like it was more than enough.
Police. What are you talking about? Cindy, say something. I'm not getting a divorce.
Michael completely lost his composure and turned his anger toward Cindy.
Stop. I don't want to call the police in front of Kevin.
Fear appeared in Kevin's eyes as he clung to Cindy. It was clear to everyone that Kevin's gaze was not meant for his father. Hearing Cindy's scream, Michael finally collapsed on the spot. He had been rejected by the only person who had ever loved him and devoted herself to him. For Michael, who couldn't do anything on his own, this reality was overwhelmingly crushing. It essentially signified the ruin of his life. Everyone, I'm truly sorry for bringing my personal issues here. Please, go back to your regular duties. With my words, the employees, who had been frozen in place, snapped back to reality. Everyone returned to their routine, acting as if the scene that had just unfolded hadn't happened. At the heart of the area where everyone avoided walking, Michael was on his knees. Michael, in accordance with your father's will, I'll give you a little kindness. I'm giving you 10 minutes to leave this company. You must move everything out of the house by today. If you have any complaints, hire a lawyer with your own money and file them against me. After extending this last bit of mercy to Michael, I turned to Cindy and Kevin. Cindy, Kevin, come with me. Leaving Michael in the lobby with a few employees, I led the two to the executive office. I brewed coffee from the built-in coffee maker and offered it to Cindy. I motioned for the two to take a seat, then began to speak. You followed Michael because you were protecting Kevin. Surprised by my words, Cindy showed an unexpected expression.
If you put it that way, my actions might seem justifiable. But honestly, I had my own desires too. I thought if money came in, I wouldn't have to continue living like this.
Cindy looked down, staring at the coffee on the table. It's natural to think that way. Ultimately, I abandoned Michael for my own life, but you didn't abandon Kevin. You chose to walk a tough path with Kevin. That decision wasn't just for yourself. As I spoke, tears began to fill Cindy's eyes again. Kevin looked up at his mother and gently rubbed her back. Our meeting might not have been under the best circumstances, but I don't resent you. No matter what decisions you and I make, Kevin is your son and my grandson. I will keep an eye on your lives. I felt a newfound affection for Kevin that I hadn't felt while we lived together. Because I saw him through Michael, I hadn't developed an attachment, but now I fully recognized him as my dear grandson. As I shared my farts, Cindy cried even more. Kevin, young as he was, seemed to understand that these tears were different from the earlier ones.
Good to you, Mom.
He continued to smile and rub her back. As for Michael, contrary to our worries, he left the house smoothly. He probably finally understood that we had abandoned him. It seemed he realized that staying here would bring him no benefit anymore. After a while of silence, one day I received a call from the local police at the company.
Are you a relative of Michael, actually?
The officer told me that Michael had been found collapsed in a park. It appeared he had been wandering the streets almost without eating or drinking for several days. He was suffering from malnutrition and mental disarray and was now under protection at a local hospital.
The individual seems to be in a state of confusion, and we understand there have been family issues. Since he is an adult, we leave any further actions up to his family members.
It seemed the hospital staff were aware of the situation and were not forcing me to take him back. Even though we were family, there was no obligation to that extent. I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but I no longer have any involvement with him. It may sound cold, but I firmly stated it.
Understood.
After my words, there was a brief silence, but then a response came. Although physically and mentally worn out, Michael was safe, at least. That fact alone should be enough, without any need for joy or sorrow. But this was my answer. Eventually, Cindy and Michael's divorce was finalized. Having looked after Michael all this time had left Cindy worn out. Naturally, the damages from gambling and the habitual emotional abuse were considered, and she successfully claimed a significant amount in alimony. This left Michael literally penniless, and, despite his deteriorating mental and physical health, committed to a tough job. It was a just retribution for the years of suffering he had caused Cindy. What George really wanted for me, I may never know. What would George think of the decisions I made? From what I know, having spent so long with him, I'm sure George would have approved of this outcome. Having witnessed such a loving father up close, did Michael feel nothing? If he had loved Cindy, even if clumsily, and lived each day earnestly despite being poor, surely this would not have been the outcome. Or perhaps, the day we parted ways, This outcome was already determined. In any case, Michael had betrayed Cindy's kindness and drowned in his desires. We were not being selfish. We did what we could, and beyond that, we reclaimed our own lives. The company regained its vibrancy like in George's days, and with strategies leveraging the strengths of a female entrepreneur, it continues to grow daily. Cindy and I both lost our husbands. However, having a partner isn't the only form of happiness in life. I have the company that George left behind, and Cindy has Kevin. Isn't that fact enough? Cindy plans to obtain her nail technician certification while working within her limits. The alimony you receive from Michael might as well be considered your money originally, so there's no need to feel disgusted by relying on it. I reassured her repeatedly.
As a nail technician, I can work from home. That way, I'll have more time with Kevin.
Cindy's face, now frequently smiling, had completely shed its previous gloom. Every time I see Cindy laughing with Kevin, I am reminded that my judgment was not wrong.